Welcome everyone to another episode of the Balance and Empathy Show. Today we are going to talk about burnout and its relation to balance and empathy. I want to welcome you, Rena Skrill from Australia and Ashok from Canada, the founder of the Empathy Clinic. So if you are watching, then please let us know where are you watching from because we want to touch souls all over the world. So let us know where are you based. So let's dive into the topic burnout in regards to balance and empathy. So the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about burnout and balance and empathy is boundaries. Because when you are suffering from burnout, it can be very heavy for you personally in your job, but also in your personal relationships. And I think managing your boundaries is key to preventing you from reaching the point of burnout. And maybe, I don't know, you're being too empathetic to other people, maybe, but you should show more empathy to yourself. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, teacher, I think burnout is a complicated story, but what it starts from is trying to push yourself to achieve something. And when we're younger and we're trying to make our mark, if you will, we want to push ourselves and push ourselves. The problem is that if you don't have an off button, you don't stop when you need to recharge. And if you don't stop when you need to recharge, and what you said was so beautiful about the boundary issue, is that you're trying to please people, you're trying to please yourself, you're trying to make that mark, and it just gets to be too much. And if you can't pull it back and do that recharge thing, i.e., balance again, then that's when you get into burnout territory. And what burnout is beginning to change your core values about why you're doing what you're doing. And most of us are doing something to do a good job. But if we push ourselves hard, it's harder and harder to do that good job. I'll just leave it there for now.
That's so true. What do you think, Rena?
Absolutely, it comes down to a lot of unmanaged stress and being chaotic and simply out of control. And it really is, it's a mental illness at the end of the day. So we have to really, pull back, be empathetic, as you said, to ourselves, establish those rules and boundaries, and just really reflect on the fact that, we have so much responsibility. People are so reliant on us. Let's look holistically about what we need to do. And the key thing for me is the reset button. Press that reset button. Push back and just take a deep breath, relax. We all have challenges and issues and stresses. So getting that balance right between what's here, and what you actually have to achieve. And sometimes just putting it all into perspective, we can make things out of something that really doesn't exist sometimes, depending on the chatter that's going on in our minds. So it's a matter of just looking at things objectively, holistically, and maybe even bouncing off someone else and saying, look, this is how I feel. What do you think? I need your help. Am I being realistic in terms of the way I'm dealing with this? So press that reset button, ask for help, get better sleep. Sleep is just so important. Isn't it? Isn't that right, Michelle?
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Rena. And I really, it can take one thing. So to be a healthy human being, you have to get everything that you need in the right amounts. You need the right nutrition. You need the right sleep, as you so correctly said. You also need the right mindset. You need to have hopefully some friends, a social life, safe relationships. And so it can take one thing in short supply that can interrupt the whole system. So when the English used to cross over the Atlantic, before they understood the role of vitamin C, they would get a condition called scurvy. And it was simply a vitamin C deficiency. And they discovered that if they took limes on their trips, then that they would not get scurvy, which is why one of the slang terms for being a British person, which I am, is a limey, because they would have limes on their ships. So the point is, it can take just a very small thing that you can forget about or ignore and not pay attention to, and the whole system can begin to deconstruct. So I think that's a really good point. And the next thing I want to say is based on what you were saying around telling someone. And for a lot of people, when they get burnt out, and I'm very interested in what you guys say about this, a lot of people, when they get burnt out, they feel ashamed. They don't want to tell anyone about it. And if they don't tell anyone about it, then they're actually alienating and isolating themselves. They make it very difficult to feel comfortable saying, I'm stressed, because burnout sometimes is mistaken for being weak, and it's not.
And so I hope you will hear me.
Sorry, Tisha. We've lost Tisha there for a moment, but I just wanted to elaborate on that. It's so important to have community and that support, and letting go of that shame. It's okay. It's okay to ask for help. Giving people the confidence, looking for indicators when people are run down, when they've lost their passion, when you see them trying to achieve something and just too difficult, it's too challenging. I think it's important that we look for those indicators in people and step in. That's the role of community, and that's our responsibility to step up and look out.
And I think we have to make the conversation normal rather than awkward. So if someone is, and we could talk about almost any mental wellness condition and say the same thing, but with burnout, it's especially important because the most common people who get burnt out are people who are people pleasers and are high achievers and are generally very successful because they're pushing and pushing and pushing. They're not the first people to say, I'm having trouble. Can I get help? I can't do what I said I was going to do. I think I'm working too hard and I need to do less, because they're so used to just pushing and pushing and pushing. And if you tell all your friends, I'm going to climb Mount Everest, and you're just about to summit and you've had enough, you're tuckered. It might be very difficult to turn around and say, I think I need to come down again. And you might even risk your life trying to reach that summit, simply because you feel that you have to. That's kind of the problem with burnout.
Interestingly, I was reading an article in Forbes, and they said that pre-pandemic, 53% of millennials were already suffering from burnout. It's very high statistics.
The numbers are staggering, especially in some of the professions, especially in healthcare professions, where at some point, almost 75% of people have had burnout. I've been burnt out 3 times. And that's why I got interested in burnout, and especially as I got through some of my career. And it's not always easy, because when you do get burnt out, I was burnt out in med school, and that's when it started. When you do get burnt out, you keep telling yourself, I can do it. Everyone else seems to be doing it. I'm not doing it, so I'm not going to let on that I can't do it. Everyone else is doing it. And then you just keep dragging along, and no one's going to say, is anyone finding this hard? And admit that maybe we need to step back a bit, take inventory, press that restart button, as you said, and talk to each other and find out. Just getting emotional support from each other is very, very helpful.
That's really interesting, Ashok. Could you tell the audience what you did? You've suffered burnout 3 times. What were some of the strategies that you put in place to cope with burnout?
Well, a really important strategy when you're dealing with burnout is to sit back and look at your entire life and look at where your work and your life line up. And one of my lines is to fit your work into your life. Don't fit your life into your work. And if you can get that right, then your work is part of your life. It isn't your entire life. There's nothing wrong with working hard. I don't mind working really, really hard at things and doing well at it, but you have to have time for the other things. I'm a hobby guy. And so I think it's always, if you don't have time for a hobby, you're probably working too hard. It doesn't mean you have to have one. It means that, do you have something else that you can do? And that's absolutely key. We're not going to talk about retirement today, but when people retire, the best way to retire is just do more of your hobbies. But if you've never had a hobby and you've only worked your whole life and then you retire, you might run into trouble because you don't know how to live your life. You've only lived your work. And so I think having other things that you do in your life, and as we've said a few times already, it's really important to connect with people, ask them how they're doing, tell them how you're doing, and have honest relationships around your needs. And I think that's the way you can go from a burnout situation where you're feeling isolated to a more balanced situation where you're feeling supported and connected to yourself, because ultimately it's a relationship with yourself.
Very true. Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to see you from all over the world. We'd love your questions.
I think burnout is extremely common, and whenever I talk about burnout, I often don't get questions from the audience because those audiences, that means that someone has to reveal that they might have an issue. So it usually, when I'm taking my coffee break, people come up to me between the talks and say, "Can I talk to you about this and that?" So it's that reveal problem that we still need to work with, where we're saying, can people admit or say that they're feeling burnt out when they actually are? That's the conversation we have to normalize, I think, Rena.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the way you talked about, fitting your work into life. That's so critical, having that line in the sand and saying, okay, I'm going to finish work now and I'm going to get on to my hobby.
Well, Rena, what often happens, especially if you're training hard for a career, and I'm just going to talk about med school for a minute. I know there's so many other important professions out there, but you put so much effort trying to get into the school. When you get into the school, you put so much effort staying in the school and doing well. And when you graduate, you have the same idea. You're just always putting all that effort in. You don't kind of realize that, I can put effort on other things. And so even in the training, it's very, very consumptive of all of your energy, your heart energy, your spiritual energy, and your intellectual energy. And then when you graduate, if you haven't changed that program of being kind of all in to your subject, then you sometimes don't have time. And another phenomena is the divorce rates, especially in doctor marriages. So a lot of doctors marry doctors. I didn't, but a lot of doctors marry doctors, and then down the road they're completely alienated from each other because marriage isn't a hobby, but they didn't make time for it. I think Tisha is playing peekaboo with us today.
I think she's frozen just for a moment there.
But Rena, I was going to ask you about the importance of nutrition and even just taking the right nutrition for your body, whether it's vitamins or omega-3 oils and these kind of things. I think it's so important to pay attention to the balance of our nutrition, which is a really helpful way to minimize burnout. If you don't have time to look after that part of your body. So I remember, for example, when I was training, I had no time for food. You're grabbing a snack here and there, maybe fast food. You had no time. And I'm thinking, I'm needing my brain as much as I will ever need, especially if you're doing a 36-hour shift. And all I've had is a secondhand sandwich, maybe a Coca-Cola, back in the day, and just raw energy. It's just, can you just talk to that for a second about balancing with the nutrition?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not a nutritionist myself, but I'm very active in the corporate world and I work long hours. So what I do to manage myself is that I try and make sure that I eat a lot of protein and vegetables, and I drink a lot of water. So, but I do know that I am deficient in omega-3, and I knew that because I did a blood test for myself to find out what my ratio was of omega-6 to omega-3. And you're supposed to be 3.2 or below, 3.2.1 below, and I was 18.5 below. Now, I was meditating, I was working out, and I thought I was eating okay. So then what I did was I went on the diet for which is very fine the idea in protein. I just don't eat enough fish, wild fish to eat. And I found that after 4 months, I had more energy in my brain. I didn't have to prepare certain notes when I was doing a presentation. I was able to retain more. My recovery to the gym was amazing, absolutely amazing. And my joint pain diminished. So, I just found tremendous benefits with increasing the omegas in my daily habits. And Tisha, I know that you've had experience with your children and yourself.
Yeah, I think, I've always been very, very interested in the role of nutrition in keeping our bodies. So to imagine a car. So we have to make sure that the car is maintained and looked after. But I also think that we need to put the right fuel in it. And if our bodies don't have the right fuel, it doesn't matter how nice your car is, it's not going to run properly. And I've always thought that the right fuel helps our brains work properly and our bodies work properly. And then we can have that balance so that our bodies don't burn out, because your body can burn out, your mind can burn out, and so can your spirit. And that's why I think it's so important to look after all of it. And one thing can upset the balance, and that's why it's important to pay attention to everything.
We've got questions coming in. John May, welcome. John says, are we already in burnout? We will not be the first to know. Our partner only will. They will notice. So just a few reading that out. It's not on my screen anymore.
I read the first part of it, so while we're waiting for it to come back up again, I think what our guest is mentioning is there's individual burnout. Oh, here we are again. Keep going, Rena.
They will notice that they are being pushed into a smaller and smaller corner. Even when they're different, hard will be elsewhere. Be truthful, believe me. Our family and even our colleagues will notice our irritability, anger, lethargy, and motivation will set in our performance will approach. So, if I could give any one question.
So just to keep going with this, I think we can have individual burnout, a team can burn out, and a culture can burn out. And if you think about it, many of the greatest cultures in the world have burnt out largely because they extinguish the resources around them, whether it's the fall of the Roman Empire or many things like that. And I think that when we exhaust the supplies or our resources, we are personally burning out. And our guest mentioned very well that often the person that's burning out is the last person to notice it. So other people might notice, you seem to be detached. You're not paying as close attention as you used to. Are you listening? Are you here now? You seem preoccupied with whatever it is. Maybe they're on their phone too much, or they're not able to really focus on conversations. And the person will say, I'm fine. I'm doing great. I'm okay. And then often what happens after that is there's some kind of usually a mistake or something breaks or something happens. It might be a health crisis. It could be a mistake at work. It could be agitation and a fight at work that simply because people can't control their emotions as well when they're burning out. And the person who's burning out might be the last person to know it. And that's why we need to make it part of the conversation as to what to look for in yourself. If you're burning out, are you as attentive to the things that you used to be? Are you still as passionate about the things that used to make you passionate? Can you experience joy when joyful things are happening? Can you focus on what's around you? Are you still keen on doing things outside of your work, like your hobbies or seeing your friends? Maybe not get into it much today, but are you using alternative means to cope? And that could be alcohol or drugs or sometimes misbehaviors because you're getting very, very stressed out. And we see this all the time in some of the emergency professions, police and firefighters and EMS workers who I work with a lot, when they get not just post-traumatic stress, but they get burnt out. And another key thing to notice with people who are burning out is they start to get numb. And this is really, really key because we're talking about empathy and balance. And people who are naturally empathic might start to become less empathic. And that's because they're starting to get numb. In other words, they're doing less and less and less and less to be able to the point where they're actually distancing themselves from their own empathic skills. And they may not see that happening. They just may see that as oh yeah, I've just got either something else on my mind or they might just deny it. But when you see someone, particularly someone who's empathic, beginning to get a bit numb, that's often a good clue that they're getting burnt out. And that's a good clue to know in yourself when you're having trouble focus on others, because empathy is really an other focus. And if you're having trouble doing that, and it happens in medicine all the time, where if you get a bit burnt out, you have trouble just always being in that giving and otherness way. And that's when it's really, really important, again, to talk to somebody, but identify it and get some help. Do you agree with that, Rena?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, a lot of corporations, certainly in Australia, I find, they're trying to put different programs in place for their employees, like a wellness program, eat healthy, giving them, more time off during the day, maybe to go do a gym workout or something like that. So, to help avoid all this type of thing and so that they can experience joy. Obviously healthy workers are more productive workers and
Exactly.
better results.
Exactly. There she is.
Yes, there I am. I'm sorry, my internet is lagging, but I'm so happy that you are here to read the comments and comment.
Well, Rena's doing a fantastic job of hosting the show today. So
Rena is fantastic, so I'm not surprised.
So, Tisha, we were just talking about different corporations and how they are trying to help their employees by implementing different wellness programs for their well-being. Like it might be a membership to the gym, giving some time off during their lunch break, to do a gym workout, having a massage.
Yes, I've heard of companies doing that also here in the Netherlands, and those employers who do that actually, research show that they come as one of the top ranked favorite employers. So people really appreciate it when you do that as an employer, because it also saves time, because when you're working on your health during lunch, after work you can go home, and it just also helps the balance between work and your personal life, and people often truly appreciate it. So I think it really helps.
And one key thing I've noticed is some employers will not allow people to have their lunch at their desk. It's a really great initiative. They have to step up, and go out, move away from the desk, and have a meal. we've got a great question coming in. Tisha, are you able to read that question out?
Yes, so Zulfikar, hi, thank you for watching. He is saying individual burnouts with self-agony, with own excessive work, expressing dissatisfaction and unhappiness on everything around and not listening to any solution, and ultimately impacting on health. Your advice would be appreciated. So what is talking about work dissatisfaction and unhappiness on everything around it. So the big question here is, how is he so unhappy at work? Where is this coming from? Is it the type of work, or is it something going on at work? Maybe a culture problem, or maybe too much on his plate, maybe other colleagues not doing their work, and then he or she is fixing the problem for others. And while it's very kind of you when you are fixing other people's problems at work, sometimes someone is sick. You know, that's wonderful if you do that, but it cannot be a situation that keeps continuing. You know, so in these cases, you really need to also discuss this when it's an ongoing situation. Be fair on how you're going to divide the work between the team, because otherwise, as Ashok earlier mentioned, teams can also burn out. So then it's not just one person being sick, but if you're overloading the whole team, you know, eventually they can take it for a little while, you know, but then eventually the whole team will be burned out. And I think that's not a situation you want. So my advice would be to talk about it with your boss, you know, and with the team, and then together find a way to work towards a solution.
I think that's a great answer, Tisha. But and to add to what you're saying, I think the boss should be assuming that the people that they're leading may be experiencing burnout. And companies who are aware of this issue spend more time assuming that burnout is going to happen and use preventative measures so that the employees have a means and a place to go. So a good example of this is an experiment that they did in some hospitals, where all they did was they just got some of the staff to go to a restaurant and have round tables at the restaurant on a monthly basis to talk about how they feel, get to know each other a little bit better, nothing too personal, but just talk about the feelings in the workplace. And so sometimes it's not that you need to do less, is that you need to do something just a little differently. And just having the idea, I noticed that our guest used the word agony. Yes. And I think the agony is the pain of isolation, the pain that you're putting so much effort, no one maybe appreciates you, you're not getting feedback for that, or if you are, you're not getting the feedback that helps your soul. And then if people know what you're doing and appreciate you, it is so more powerful. And also, I'm going to talk about hope in burnout. If you have hope that what you're doing is going to be successful, you will try much, much harder than if you have lost hope that what you're doing is going to be successful. And when people get together and support each other and give each other hope, and this is what boss needs to do. I think it certainly is the boss's job to assume that burnout's going to happen in the team, and give people rewards, whether it's, I guess if I had a company, I would have a gym and people would get a bonus for going to the gym for half an hour, 3 times a week kind of thing. Great cafeteria, right, with the right foods and that, but also have conversations. And so the agony, I think, is that mental isolation that people have, that, as we were saying earlier, they might feel ashamed of. And you can always get people to work harder if they're feeling hopeful, even if the nature of their work hasn't changed one iota. If they're feeling hopeful, and that this might, just think of any of the great wars. What are those great speeches that we remember? Churchill. It's about hope. The war wasn't any better the day after the speech. It's that people were inspired, they were brought together, we are in this together, and it gave hope. And the pandemic that we're all going through, I call it our World War III, is the same kind of thing. We all need hope that one day, I can actually meet you two wonderful people, because we can travel then. And and that as long as we believe that that can happen, it can fortify our energy again and maybe suppress the burnout a little bit.
Oh, 100% agree. I think hope it's indeed, it's so very important. You know, when you have hope, when you see light at the end of the tunnel, it's so cliche, but it's so true, because then, you know, you can take it a little bit longer because you know it's going to end and you know what points you're working towards to, you know, and then together with the team. And I think wonderful point also, like once a month, just talking about how is everything going is very important. And yeah, despite busy work, this is so important that you really need to make time for that. But you need to make it a priority. But what you often see in organizations is that everyone is so busy, and then these kind of topics, well, they're the first to go, right? Because yeah, I have my workload, I need to finish that on time, and then, you know, these
Yeah,
kind
but just think about this analogy. Say that you bought a lovely car, but you never have time to get it maintained.
yeah, exactly.
And your car, after about, you know, a year, it's like, it's not working anymore. You say, what's going on here? You didn't maintain it. You didn't look after it. The brakes aren't working. The spark plugs are dried up. You know, there's no oil in the engine. You're putting bad gas in the car. I always find it amazing that people treat their cars better than they treat themselves. And it's a simple idea. You know, a car will have a little light that comes up and says, you need to maintain your car now. We should have a little light that comes up on our forehead or something that says, you need to look after yourself.
Yeah, wouldn't that be amazing if we would get that? Yeah, that's going to be the new next invention, right? So, no, absolutely.
Fortify that energy with your mindset. You know, that's a very critical factor. And there's also a lot of great organizations that encourage meditation in the workplace. You know, I'd really encourage people to look into various types of meditations. It's very important, very, very important. And I'm sure with, you know, from my experience doing meditation for 40 years, it's really helped me manage my stress in an amazing way. So it's transcendental meditation that I do, which helps my mind, all the chatter, it's all managed, you know, and I can take my mind to the bottom of the ocean where it's beautiful and calm, and I have a deeper form of sleep and rest. And then I feel rejuvenated. Yeah. It's like I really do fortify that energy that Ashok was talking about through meditation.
So I think, Rena, just to add to what you're saying, and it's beautiful the way you put it, is that the key to that is to get out of where you are at. And if you're in one place for too long, I mean, it's even if you're at a concert and you can never get out of it, the noise will eventually stop sounding like music and it will start sounding like noise. So we're designed to be in different places frequently, i.e. to be able to not be in one place for too long. Even if you just use your mouse too much, you'll get something called repetitive strain injury on your hand if you do the same thing too much. We didn't have repetitive strain injury before we had computers and a mouse. Right, you know, these are the problem you see for repetitive strain. So what happens is when you're meditating, and I'd love to hear more about it, is that you're able to get out of where you're at to give that self a break and refresh and restart again. People don't do that when they're getting burnt out. They forget to get out of where they're at.
Yes, and I think that's what you talked about earlier, Ashok, in the show. It's about taking that step back. Actually taking that step back and just looking like what's going on, what's happening. And if you're running all the time, you know, you don't have time just to sit and think and be calm, you know. I think that's, if you run, no one can run all the time, you know, and burnout and being overloaded. No one can be like on 100% all the time, on that adrenaline all the time, you know. It releases stress hormones and it's not healthy for you. So taking that step back and meditating, yes, obviously that's very good. Yeah, many times I've said that. I have this little dog and I take walks out in nature. And for me, that's very relaxing, because I take myself out of the situation, away from noise, away from screens, just out in nature, and that relaxes me. And there are many ways on how to take a step back, as long as you do so.
Exactly. And I call it the pit stop problem. So if you have a race car driver and they've got 100 laps to go and they've got to pull in every 25 laps, but at the last stretch, they're telling their manager, I just want to keep more doing laps. I'm in the lead. I need to keep going. And the guy, the person managing them is saying, you're going to blow the engine if you don't pull in. Yeah, you can always catch up. You might come in second, but you're going to blow the engine. And the driver's saying, one more lap, before, and of course, kaboom. And then they've lost the everything, really. So that's the problem with burnout. You want to do one more lap. You need a pit stop, but you're trying to push the car or the person beyond its limits until something breaks. And that's always the huge problem with burnout. You don't want something to break. You don't want to get a heart attack. That's the first time you realize that you should be doing something about your wellness.
Absolutely. And just one other point also to discuss. I don't know if you discussed that already when my connection was down, but that topic is shame. Because what I know about people being in burnout is, when you have your leg broken, you see what's wrong with you. But when a burnout, that's inside of you, people don't see that. And then often, people feel, well, you don't see that, and it's not taken into account. Maybe you're ashamed to talk about it, because, people think there's nothing wrong with you. And so what can we do to help those people, to come over that shame and just accept them being in that situation, let them heal?
Well, we did have a chance to touch on the issue of shame, because it's such a profound issue. And I'm so glad you brought it back to there, because when Rena and I were talking about it, just the fact that the three of us are talking about this and that people would be watching this is so helpful, because the line I use, we have to normalize the conversation. There's nothing shameful in saying, I need to take a pit stop because my engine is going to blow. But how does it get to be when someone feels ashamed? Because you can't see the engine. Right? You see the car going by, you can't see the engine, but you also know that something's going to happen. And I think when people, especially kind of people pleasers who are working hard, there's a lot of expectation on them. They've got a summit, as I said earlier, the Mount Everest example. You shouldn't be ashamed to say, I think I need to take a break, or I think I need to go back. Because everyone else is feeling something very similar. That's what always happens when people get together to talk about burnout, is they're almost surprised and shocked that everyone else is feeling something very similar. And I can use World War II as an example. It wasn't only until quite recently that people realized that people who were in the battlefronts were stressed out. They had PTSD. And so it's such a strange idea that it took years for people to admit that they were feeling a lot of stress and a lot of burnout. And once we make that a normal conversation, it becomes as simple as, when are you taking your car in for maintenance? Oh, I'm going in next week. Oh, I've got mine booked for a month, right? And then it becomes a normal way of being.
And you described that beautifully, Ashok, when you said it's really, having those honest relationships around your needs. You hit the nail on the head. Summarised it beautifully. Please keep questions coming in, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here. Red One, thank you for joining us. Nice to see you.
Yes, and he is saying, I think we touched on that earlier too, pandemic is a barrier to that as well. Maybe so. And maybe not so, in one sense.
I think the pandemic I'm a psychiatrist, so I've been working with people for years, and I've been working with people during the pandemic. And what's interesting about the pandemic, there's lots of interesting things to say about, is that we all have a common problem. It's one thing if you're stressed about something and it's very unique to you and you're not sure if people understand it. But the pandemic has created a common problem. So when people have a common problem, they're much more likely to to have empathy and sympathy for each other, because we're all understanding it's a difficult situation. And this, I'm really, really hoping as much as possible that the pandemic will increase the chance that people will feel comfortable saying, that was stressful. How did you cope? And instead of, well, I'm fine, and not talk about coping strategies. Because I think the pandemic, if we're going to get something good out of this, one of the things I think we can get good out of this is to become more globally connected on the issues of stress and burnout. Because look how fast the science moved on the vaccine, for example. Look how fast cooperation happened between countries. Suddenly there was no language barrier when it comes to looking for an answer to help the human race, not just help us as individuals. So that's why I think it might actually be a silver lining here.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think talking about it, that's 100% key here, because some people may react very good in kind of stress situation, also in the pandemic. Some people really flourish working from home. They're feeling more relaxed. They're not in a commute, and then for them, it's not that bad working from home. And then for other people, they really miss the social contact with colleagues, and they really suffer and feel alone. And so talking about it with each other, exactly how you said, how are you coping? And also keeping the conversation going, talking to people, how are you doing? Just that simple question, and having that chat with a colleague that's alone, that doesn't have kids at home, or doesn't have a partner, and just showing that empathy towards someone can also really help. And I think also, can help prevent burnout from starting, I think.
Well, I think what I'm trying to say here is that we should assume that burnout is going to happen instead of waiting for it to happen and waiting for someone to say it started or they're the last person. We should assume all the time that burnout can happen, and therefore we have a mechanism of checking in with each other and with self. So that just like with your car and maintaining it, you get that little flashing light and you say, I need to call the shop and get my oil changed. Well, we should have that too. We should have some regularity. And it may not stop burnout, but it would stop it from becoming severe, because severe burnout can cause all kinds of nasty issues, including suicide. So I think our goal here is to help each other, help ourselves.
That's so true. Thank you. Judy Robinson is saying how to manage your own burnout when leading a team who you can see are burning out too, but there is not a culture in support slowing down.
Rena, do you want to handle that?
Ooh, yes, Judy. It really comes down to leadership. You would really hope that the executive team can see cracks in performance, in KPIs not being met, Judy, and that they can intervene and actually make suggestions and help people to pivot, because that's a crisis situation when it comes to that, Judy. So you want to produce results. You're possibly trying to do more with less resources, trying to achieve the same outcomes, probably increase budgets, etc. It's time for the executive team to step in. And it's up to us to really help change culture as well. It's not just the executive team. We need to say, hey, stop, this is not working, and help improve that culture and that dynamics, because, it's a crisis situation, Judy.
I totally agree on that, Rena. I think that's all about leadership, and it's really not smart if the executive team is just waiting for a crisis to happen. So they should actually step in as soon as possible and see what they can do together with the team to help them, resolve the situation. But doing nothing, that's obviously not a solution. Things will get worse. So yeah, keep that conversation. Go and talk to your executive team. Because otherwise it's a crisis waiting to happen. And then we have another comments coming in. Just waiting for that to show on the screen. I don't see the name. User. He says, what are the top 3 strategies you leverage to help others that have withdrawn during this period? So I think he's referring to the pandemic. And how can we get them involved in helping others also? So might I suggest we all 3 gave one strategy to handle this. So for me, I would say make sure, even if it's online, you meet with the entire team, and you make sure everyone gets a turn in talking, instead of usually during a meeting, it's often the same people, that talk. Make sure everyone talks and ask open questions, make sure how everyone is doing and that how they feel. So get everyone involved and give everyone a chance to open up about it and how's it going. What's your strategy?
I'll go second. I'm always going to say the word empathy. And I think empathy is always a good strategy. And the empathy question starts with, how are you? And the answer might be, I'm doing fine. And the empathy question after that has been, yes, I can see that you're doing fine, but how are you feeling on the inside? What's happening to your engine? And that's why I think normalizing the conversation about how people are feeling, especially if they're not feeling their best, and having some accountability to each other. Just imagine if you had a company and each had one person to do a how are you in a circle. Then by the time that circle is done, everyone's got a better, richer sense of how each other is doing. And sometimes, as we said earlier, just knowing that you have the support of the team can give you more energy and passion for the team to work better. Not necessarily slow down and stop productivity, but to actually be more productive because you know that people have your back.
And just to add to that circle, what I would do is I'd suggest actually saying to people, what can I do to help you? How can I help you achieve your outcomes? What's holding you back? So knowing that everyone has results to produce, trying to help them produce those results and asking those open questions. Again, it all comes down to the empathy that Ashok was talking about and the balance required,
But there's actually quite a bit of research that proven that people who help others are stronger. They're resilient. And so helping someone can make you feel better. Maybe you had a horrible day and all you could do was help somebody else. That can make that day into a beautiful day.
Judy, would love you to come back in and comment on what we had to say about the corporate sector, if you're still there. Judy Robertson.
Let's see if she responds. In the meantime, we have another comment coming in. He or she is saying we have to be careful when we are helping others because if we don't consider the right action, it may hurt them.
Can I just respond to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the reason why you might hurt them is that if someone says that they're feeling something or you think they're feeling something, you may come up with a solution that does not fit their story. And my mom used to tell me to put on a sweater when she was cold. And it was okay to say that, but it wasn't what I needed. So if you're going to help somebody, ask, will this be helpful? And what would be helpful? So sometimes an imprecise solution to help somebody doesn't help them. It might even hurt them. So that's a really good point that person's made.
Judy, you're back. Did we answer your question?
We're just waiting for an answer from Judy to come in the comments. So once she answers, I will show it to the screen and then we can respond.
I think it's important for us to also to realize that burnout, again, not to put a gender on this, but sometimes women get very burnt out because of the multiple roles that they have. Men are much more used to saying, I'm fine, and they can immerse themselves in their work. But women are such multitaskers. They always have so many other things going on as well, and there's so much more expectation. And if they're feeling stressed or depressed, they may get very locked into a shamey kind of alienated cycle. So it's really important for us to realize that sometimes both genders get burnt out, but sometimes women get more burnt out.
Yes, and it's all about balance, right?
Exactly.
Having a healthy balance in your roles, in your tasks, and being able to say no too. No is also an answer. And if you're saying no, you're not a bad person. You're just taking care of yourself, and if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of others. So,
right.
Very good point. Judy, so happy to hear that we answered the question.
Oh, Judy is making another comment. She says, I think at times you feel it at your own leadership capability, but some systems can be relentless. That can be the case. And then, as we said, open up the conversation with your executive team. But if that situation is not changing, and the expectations are unrealistically high, there's not a solution being offered, then I think you really need to ask yourself if that's the right place for you. Regarding also the danger of burnout if you continue too long in that type of situation. But again, I just hope that the executive team looks at this positively and will help out the team.
Absolutely agree. They have a responsibility at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
For the well-being of people. So Judy, keep up your great work. Keep leading.
Rishad is saying, what should parents do to inspire children to avoid stress, especially during pandemic and lockdown? And when children can't go anywhere but feel all the stress, studies, career, and growing up challenges. Well, as a parent myself, what I try to do, luckily I'm in the Netherlands and children are back to school now. But what I used to do when we were in lockdown, when they were at home, I really made sure that I created a stress-free environment. So I remember us sitting at the kitchen table, all with our laptops working, because then they have to work from a laptop all of a sudden, and they need help. So this was a really hard period for me because I needed to work, and then I needed to also help them with school. Many parents went through this. It was just quite a hard period. But I used to make sure I put a nice scented candle just for a nice smell. I put in some nice background music, some birds singing or whatnot, just to make sure that there was a relaxing atmosphere. I made sure that the environment was nice and clean, just relaxing for the eye, no messy stuff around there, and so that everyone felt in a nice place. And also in that situation, when you're all working at the kitchen table, make sure you take breaks and that you can take, if you're allowed to go out, most countries were, you take walks with them, go and walk, go and move, even if it's a walk with your dog or just with your kids. Go out of the situation, out of the house, move around, and make sure you get enough breaks. And that's what I used to do. But I'm sure Ashok and Rena have some more wonderful advice.
Wow, that's such a comprehensive answer, Tisha. And I remember my mom would say, go out and play. And we would go out and play sometimes all day. I think play is underrated. Kids naturally know how to play. And sometimes with this pandemic, suddenly they may not have the same avenues to play. And I say that it definitely would be is a good idea to encourage children and give them some things to do that are play-based. And they also need a bit of time off screen, off iPads and laptops and cell phones. And not that those things are necessarily bad by themselves, but if that's the main form of play, then the child is not getting the kind of stimulation they need. Their whole body, their whole mind, and their whole creativity. And we used to buy art supplies for the house, and so we would have Play-Doh, we'd have paints, even toothpaste one day. Don't. It's a long story. So that the children can play with each other and learn to play with themselves, so that they have some kind of activity that they can do. These are the precursors of having a hobby. And like I said earlier on, if you have a good hobby, it might be related to something that you like to do. You know, I'm a musician, of course, so that's a huge hobby for me. You can always rely on that when things are stressful. And play busts stress. It's very hard to be stressed out when you're playing. Even just putting on music and all of us dancing, you know, when we're a bit stressed out, that can change. So I think my answer is going to be to reinforce play. And you can also have moments of play. You're not playing all day. You can say, let's play for 20 minutes. Let's just have a little play break and do that. And when you come back to it, you're fresh again and your mind is focused on what you're supposed to be doing.
And I'd say, you know, encourage more engagement and communication. So, for example, ask the children, what great thing happened to you today? What did you learn which was new and inspiring and motivating? So find out what actually they did during the day, because you're all sitting, like you said, Tisha, at the dining table on your laptops. But what exactly are you doing, you know? So, yeah, open it up for conversation. So there's more cross-pollination, engagement, collaboration, and use that probably around a mealtime to have that great discussion, because it's always wonderful around food and family.
And just to add to that about playing, you know, I used to make jokes and say to the kids, come on, we're gonna game. We have game time now. Obviously, I did not mean like computer games, because I suck at that. But I meant board games, you know. So we went out in the garden. I have a little corner there, which is covered. So even if it rains, we can still sit there. There's a table there. And then we would go out there and just play a little board game, even if it was just a deck of cards, you know, just some game. But having that quality time together away from the screen, because screen is not necessarily bad, but again, balance. Too much screen time is just not good for you. So yeah, I would say, come on, kids, it's game time. And we would go out in the garden and just play a little board game, you know, even 15 minutes, but just to take your mind off of things, be together, you know, laugh, make jokes.
Yes.
So what I would do, I have these books for kids with jokes in them. So instead, when we have breakfast, and I still do that, when we have breakfast every morning, these books are on the table, because I do not allow them to go on their phone during breakfast or dinner. I don't allow it. So they don't like it, but I just don't allow it. So we have these books on the table with jokes in them, and they're just sitting there eating their breakfast, and then they take turns into telling a joke. And so they're eating, and you know, and then they go to school in a happy mood. So
Yeah.
that's something that I do.
Yeah, we used to do puppet shows, and I think sometimes if everyone has a puppet, just so they can just talk about the thing, it's very useful, and it you know, it opens up a different style of conversation, because people will talk differently as a puppet than as himself. And we have all these videos now of the kids, and obviously me playing guitar and having all these puppet shows. But it opens up and it changes the tone from stress and anxiety and depression to something that's hopefully fun. And as Rena was saying earlier, conversational. Because when you have puppets talking to puppets, and it could just be a hand, you don't need to actually have it could be a sock, right? When you have puppets talking, they will tell you things. Kids will tell you things with a puppet that they may not tell you without the puppet. So it's about opening that conversation too.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. And then I think we can use this as the final question or comment. Tan Lagerstay, considering the name, I think you're from Holland, if I see correctly, but let's see. He says, and you don't have to be perfect. It's allowed to fail. No feel, but feel better, he says. I think absolutely. That I always say that to my kids too. No one is 100% perfect. I'm not 100% perfect. And you don't have to be, because nobody will ever be 100% perfect. You know, and it's not called failing. I always say you try and you learn. And if you don't succeed, you try again, you adjust a little bit, Try again, keep trying until you succeed.
And I think failure sometimes, if you're on a team and you're really stressed out and you're looking around, you think no one else is stressed out, I need to keep pushing and keep pushing and pushing, and having burnout. If everyone can admit it's okay to say, let's take a break, it's okay to recharge, it's not a failure to come in for a pit stop and it will ultimately win the race. It's a failure to not come into the pit stop, blow up your car, and that's how the story went. So sometimes it's not really failure at all. It's just taking the time to reassess and again prevent burnout.
Wonderful. Well, I think we can end the show with that comment. Ashok and Rena, thank you so much. So considering burnout, make sure you have enough pit stops for yourself. Take care of yourself, set those boundaries, and take good self-care. So thank you all for watching and listening, and we will see you again in another 2 weeks.